Hi, my name is State Senator Joan Lovely. I'm the state senator for the 2nd Essex District. That is the communities of Beverly, Danvers, Peabody, Salem, and Topsfield. Represent about 155 to 160,000 people. That's how the districts are divided. There's 40 Senate districts across the Commonwealth. So I'm one of 40 in the state Senate. The House worked on their budget back in April. We worked on the Senate budget, and we passed a budget 2 weeks ago, and now it's in conference committee. Some of the highlights, we really concentrated on putting much more resources and funding towards education. We know that we are number one in Massachusetts is number one in the country for the education that we provide to our students. And our students are working really hard, especially to pass the MCAS, to be able to graduate from high school. But we also know that under our foundation budget review formula, so foundation budget is how much of a foundation that each community will get for Chapter 70 funding, for education funding. That hadn't been updated in over 20 years. So 20 years ago, we didn't have as much of a special education population that we have today. We didn't have as many English language learners that we have today. And a third component is health insurance, how we are paying for our teachers' health insurance. It wasn't as costly as it is 20 years later today. So we did a whole foundation budget review, and we are implementing the recommendations of that committee into this budget, starting to. We have to kind of transition it in slower than we would like because it's so heavily resource driven, but we made some real commitments this budget to put towards Chapter 70, which is education, again, particularly to special education, English language learners, and health insurance. So that's one of the really big things that we did. We also looked at, again, in the education piece, being able to do workforce training, especially in manufacturing. So when I go around and I talk to different chambers of commerce, I hear from business owners who say, my business is doing great, we're in a great economy, but I can't find trained workers to hire, especially in manufacturing. So we are putting the resources towards training modules to be able to train people in manufacturing. It's good to hear that manufacturing is coming back to the Commonwealth and the country, because a lot of that went overseas. But we do have that locally now as well, and our employers are looking for those resources. So we put that together as well. We did everything else in between as far as trying to take care of the most vulnerable in our society. Again, through the Department of Children and Families, we want to make sure that our foster care system is good. We're going through a big foster care review right now because we don't have enough foster parents, and we want to be able to make sure that we have a lot of foster parents, as many as possible. We want to encourage people to go into being a foster parent. Not everyone can or has the availability to be able to do that, but we only see our foster children's system growing, and it's as a result of the opioid crisis that you are seeing many more parents who are addicted to, say, heroin or some other opioid, and then because they have children, they're not able to care for their children as they're dealing with their addiction. So we are trying to make sure that we have additional resources for, again, the most vulnerable in our society, our kids, and as well our elderly, to make sure we have resources there as well. So the budget is $41.49 billion. That's billion with a B. A lot of need, a lot of priorities. Still not enough to go around to fully fund what everybody wants, but we do our best to balance it. So we have to, by Constitution, pass a balanced budget by June 30th. We actually have a bill coming up this week on the environment and how we can continue to meet our goals towards reducing our greenhouse gases. Under the Global Warming Solutions Act, we have to reduce our greenhouse gases as we go forward. Every decade, we have to meet a different benchmark. We know that about 20% of the greenhouse gases comes from power plants, but 40% of our greenhouse gases comes from automobiles. So we've done a lot in Massachusetts to reduce greenhouse gases from power plants. We no longer have coal-powered plants. We now have cleaner gas-fired power plants, although gas is still a greenhouse gas, right? So we still want to be able to reduce that. But we need to be working more towards our technology to get cleaner cars, more fuel efficient, electric cars, so that electric cars don't emit any, greenhouse gases. So that's what we're working towards in this bill. Also looking at carbon pricing. And carbon pricing is a very interesting phenomenon. They did this up in British Columbia, and you actually place a fee on what I would use. What is my carbon footprint? So I would be able to, look at my yearly usage, say for gasoline. I go to the tank and I put it in, and what did I use that year? And based on that usage, I would pay an additional fee if I'm a big user. And this is actually to change behavior, so that maybe the next time I'm going to go buy a new car, I'm going to buy something more fuel efficient, which I did recently. But it's a way to get people to be thinking about their being more fuel efficient, so we can again reduce those greenhouse gases. So there's a piece in the bill for carbon pricing. It doesn't put a price on carbon yet. It actually says let's study it. Let's look at what British Columbia did and see what the cost will be, because global warming, some people don't think it's real. It's real, and it's only going to get worse. So we need to be better. We're also looking at wage theft, a wage theft bill. And wage theft is when an employee works, but the employer doesn't pay for all the hours that were worked. And so it's a real problem for employees who are not being paid for the hours that they work. So we are taking a look at that to make sure that, again, employees are paid fairly for hours that are actually worked, and that wages aren't withheld for some reason or not paid at all. You'll see this more in a subcontracting world, but it can happen on all levels. And what the bill will do is come up with a system by which the employee can file a complaint. Who do they file it with? It would be the Attorney General's office. And then there'll be a whole series of steps to be able to take for that employee to be able to get their wages. You wouldn't think it would happen, and it does. It does, and that's why we have to file a bill. I'll tell you that a bill that we did recently, just a short couple of months ago, was on criminal justice reform. I think I had talked about this the last time I was here, and that has to do with bail reform, with reducing mandatory minimums. So I'll give you for example. Over in Middleton Jail, the House of Correction, most of the population there is for people that have committed crimes. Not big crimes, smaller crimes, but crimes nonetheless, and so they find themselves in the criminal justice system. Somebody may not be able to make a bail of $500. So they may sit over in the House of Correction for a better part of a year waiting for a trial to come up at the cost of $50,000. Whereas can we reduce that bail, get that person back in their home, in their community, on a bracelet, some type of monitoring system, so they're not a flight risk, so they don't leave, and then so they can still continue to work, support themselves, their families, while they await a trial. This is not for a hardcore criminal, someone who is a danger to our communities. It's for someone who is exactly that, who finds themselves in the system for a crime that is not violent, a non-violent crime. So we took a look at that and gave that decision to the judge to be able to say, okay, we're going to divert that person back into the community and who's being monitored, and it should reduce the cost of what we pay to the House of Correction to be able to house people. We also looked at mandatory minimums to be able to reduce the amount that someone may have to go to jail for dealing a certain drug. I actually wanted to keep the mandatory minimum for heroin and for fentanyl, because if you're dealing fentanyl and heroin and any other really terrible drug that is killing people, frankly, then you really need to be in jail for a certain amount of time or prison. You read the obituaries every week and you see at least one and sometimes two people, young people, who have died. A lot of times now you'll read an obituary where the family has said how their loved one passed away as a result of addiction. Other times people don't want to reveal that. I just went to the North Shore Recovery High School had their graduation exercises last week. I go every year. I offer some words of encouragement. It was a particularly difficult year this year for the 13 seniors. It should have been 14, and they had lost a senior just 6 weeks ago to a drug overdose. It was difficult to be at a graduation and see tears of sorrow and not tears of joy, to be really honest with you. And there were 10 seniors there because the other 3 were incarcerated. They had completed their coursework to graduate. It's an amazing school. Doesn't matter if you're incarcerated, they're going to work with these students to get them to be able to graduate. So I could go on and on about this high school. It is amazing. They do God's work. They really do. Otherwise, these students would have no opportunity to be able to get their education and go on to bigger and better. A lot go on to college. Some still continue to struggle, and they don't give up on them. We just won't. So another piece of the budget is to be able to put more resources towards prevention, opioid prevention and treatment. We hear all the time that we don't have enough beds, that when someone's ready to go into treatment, it's then, it's now. And a bed has to be available. So that's what we're working towards, to continue to make the beds available, the treatment available, so that we can get more people well. And we don't have to read about obituaries. It's awful. So we did a big housing bond bill. We put, I want to say it was over $1 billion. But what we did was created more grant opportunities to build workforce and affordable housing. We also are looking at loosening some of our zoning bylaws so that when a city like Peabody goes to think about it, putting a project in, that it would take a lower vote, a lesser vote. Here it's the planning board or the city council, and so they wouldn't need a supermajority. They just need a majority to be able to pass, to be able to encourage more dense housing, but in a really thoughtful way. A lot of communities don't want to grow too quickly. They don't want to become too dense. So I'm going to be able to give them the tools in the toolbox to be able to do this thoughtful housing. We do need housing. The Commonwealth is way behind in the amount of housing that we need to be able to house the people that we want to stay here to work. Most people can't afford to live in Boston or in the immediate area around Boston. Very, very expensive. So we're seeing a lot more people come into the suburbs like Salem and Peabody and Beverly. But even those rents are high. And so we need to be able to get more housing, get some of those rents down so people can afford to live. I've got 3 kids, and it's hard for them to make ends meet to pay for housing. If you're paying anywhere from 40 to 50 to 60% of your income is on housing, what's left? To be able to live on. The number one issue right now in my office that people are calling in is lack of housing. Someone's becoming housing insecure. They're being evicted for non-payment of rent because, again, the rents are so high they can't make ends meet. So housing bond bill, working on zoning relief so that again communities can do thoughtful housing the way that it fits in each community. Let me talk about medical marijuana. The first medical marijuana clinic opened was right in Salem, and interestingly enough, that clinic really abuts a very tight neighborhood, and the operators of that clinic went to the neighborhood association and worked closely with them to decrease the impact of having it so nearby. And you know what I have to say today? There's almost no impact. People come, with their prescription that you need to get through your doctor, but you also need to be registered through the Department of Public Health. And they go to the clinic and work with the clinicians on what it is that they're trying to alleviate. Is it nausea? Is it pain? Is it back pain? Are you a cancer patient? Whatever it might be. And of course, we know it's not just smoking or vaping. It's also ingestibles, oils, different methods of delivery. And it's had a pretty low impact to the neighborhoods or to the community, but it has a high impact for fees, because each company pays to the community a host community fee and taxes. And I think over in Salem, that's about $500,000 from that one clinic, because they do produce a lot of income. Now let's switch over to recreational marijuana. Again, the voters said yes. So, and it's been under a regulatory review for a year and a half now, I think, or pushing on to a year and a half. You can pass a ballot question, but then the thought goes into making sure that it works. The proponents of the ballot question were upset with the legislature at the beginning and said, you know, we've passed it, now just let us sell it. It doesn't quite work that way. You have to know where can you sell it, and you know, so that's what communities are working on now. So, but if your community, like Peabody, the majority said no, we don't want recreational marijuana, then the local city council and mayor can say no, we don't want it. Our community said no. A lot of communities are working on, again, because there is that resource piece of a host community fee, to be able to say, okay, yes, we do want you to come in, but this is where you can only go. I believe Peabody is looking at the medicinal marijuana as well, because it is a revenue generator. Colorado was the first to do it. I was not on the special committee. There was a special marijuana committee put together. I was not on that. But they went out to Colorado and talked to the regulators, talked to the Department of Health, Public Health, talked to operators, talked to communities. What's the impact? So that Massachusetts doesn't make the same mistakes as someone who's first out of the gate like Colorado. So remains to be seen what that's going to look like, as people do know that you can grow up to 12 plants per household, 6 plants per person, but 12 maximum if you want to grow your own. It's here to stay, and it is regulated. There is a Cannabis Control Commission who is working on this to make sure that, again, that it's tightly regulated, properly taxed. Want to make sure that people don't get sick. One thing that with the recreational marijuana, when it first came online a couple of years ago, was how do you test the plant to make sure there aren't heavy metals in it that may come up through the soil and poison somebody, mercury or cadmium or some other heavy metal. That technology wasn't really in place. It's in place now. So it really is, they track the marijuana, the for sale marijuana, from seed to sale, so that they're tracking the quality of it to make sure that it's not contaminated with anything, because it is a consumer product. Just like anything else we consume, milk, for example, that's tracked from the cow to your table, But again, it is a revenue generator for each community that may want to host either facility, recreational or medicinal. We want to hear from people, and I can't encourage them enough to contact us and let us know what's on your mind, especially when we're voting on bills. I do hear from a lot of people, which is great. We want to hear from more. So please, I don't want anyone to be shy. If you feel strongly about something, let us know, and whatever method, you can call us on the phone, email. You can find me right online, or at the State House. We're really easily accessible. So that's a big thing. We also do a monthly newsletter, and so anybody who would like to sign up for that, just give my office a call, shoot us an email. Again, whatever way you want to contact us, we'll sign you up for a monthly newsletter. We talk about what went on the prior month in the State House, and it's full of information. So, and also there's fun things too. We host a lot of school groups, senior centers for tours and lunches in the State House. Fun stuff, serious stuff, and we want to hear from people. So that would be my big last topic is please reach out. It's really an honor to represent the 2nd Essex District. I'm in my 3rd term. I am running this year for re-election. I'm sorry. I'm unopposed. I encourage anybody and everybody to run. I think especially in this political climate, people are feeling pretty charged up about running and making their voices heard, and that's exactly what we need for a good political process. So we encourage, again, everybody to contact us. You can reach me at the State House. The phone number is 617-722-1410. You can also email us, joan.lovely@masenate.gov. I have a website, joanlovely.com. Facebook, Senator Joan Lovely on Facebook. Twitter, Send Joan B. Lovely. So any method that anyone wants to contact us, please, I really heavily encourage people to give us a call. We enjoy getting your messages and talking to you in person. Some issues are easier than others and some are harder than others, but we have good discussions, and that's the way that the political process should work.